What if one man's failed glue experiment led to a global office supply phenomenon? Or what if a single unlocked gate didn't just represent a security lapse, but directly caused the fall of a 1,000-year-old empire? History isn't just a story of grand plans and powerful people. More often than not, it's a fragile, unpredictable chain of events, where the smallest moments create the world we live in today. These are the butterfly effects, tiny ripples that grow into tidal waves. And they prove that our past and our present could have been completely unbelievably different. The whole idea of the butterfly effect comes from chaos theory. In the 1960s, a meteorologist named Edward Lorenz was running a weather simulation. To save a little time, he re-entered a number from a previous run, but rounded it off. That tiny change, less than 1,000th of a unit, resulted in a completely different weather forecast. This led him to a wild conclusion. A tiny event, as small as a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil, could theoretically set off a chain reaction that ends in a tornado in Texas. Now, while a literal butterfly causing a tornado is just a metaphor, the principle is very real. History is the ultimate chaotic system, a grand ballet of human decisions, accidents, and pure chance. And when you look closely, you find these butterfly moments everywhere. So today, we're exploring 15 of the most unbelievable chain reactions in history that all started from a single tiny event. For over 1,000 years, the walls of Constantinople were the most formidable defenses in the world. But on May 29, 1453, the mighty Byzantine Empire fell to the Ottoman army of Sultan Mehmed II, not just because of giant cannons, but because someone forgot to lock a small gate. During the final desperate hours of the siege, with Ottoman forces throwing everything they had at the massive Theodosian walls, a small group of Turkish soldiers discovered a postern gate, called the Kirkoporta, had been left unbolted. It was a minor gate, used by civilians in peacetime, and likely overlooked in the chaos. This single oversight was the butterfly's wing beat. The soldiers slipped through, climbed a nearby tower, and raised the Ottoman flag. When the beleaguered Byzantine defenders saw the enemy flag flying inside their own walls, panic erupted. They believed the city's defenses had been breached on a massive scale. Their morale shattered. The organized defense collapsed into a rout, allowing the main Ottoman army to pour through the larger breaches. The fall of Constantinople was a world-changing event. It ended the Roman Empire, sent shockwaves through Christian Europe, and marked the true beginning of the Ottoman Empire's dominance. And it was all sealed by one unlocked gate. On October 27, 1962, during the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the world was arguably saved from nuclear war by the calm resolve of one man deep beneath the ocean. His name was Vasily Arkhipov, a senior officer on the Soviet submarine B-59. The submarine was hiding near Cuba when it was cornered by a fleet of 11 U.S. Navy destroyers. To force the sub to surface, the Americans began dropping non-lethal depth charges. But deep below, with no contact with Moscow, the Soviet crew had no idea the charges were warnings. They believed World War III had begun. The captain of the submarine, Valentin Savitsky, decided he was ready to launch their special weapon, a 10-kiloton nuclear torpedo. But here's the butterfly effect. Protocol required all 3 senior officers on board to agree to the launch. The captain and the political officer agreed. But Arkhipov said no. He argued that the American ships were not being aggressive in a way that signaled war, and that they should surface to await orders. In the sweltering, claustrophobic submarine, Arkhipov stood his ground, calmed the captain, and refused to give his consent. His single, courageous veto prevented a nuclear attack that would have almost certainly triggered a full-scale thermonuclear exchange, saving millions of lives and civilization as we know it. In 1968, a 3M scientist named Spencer Silva was trying to invent a super-strong adhesive for the aerospace industry. Instead, he accidentally created the exact opposite, a bizarrely weak adhesive. It was sticky enough to cling to surfaces, but could be easily peeled off without leaving a residue. It was a solution without a problem. For 5 years, Silva promoted his quirky, low-tech glue within 3M, but no one could figure out what to do with it. The butterfly flapped its wings 6 years later in a church choir. Another 3M scientist, Art Fry, was getting frustrated that the slips of paper he used to mark hymns in his book kept falling out. He suddenly remembered Silva's useless adhesive. What if he could apply a little of it to his bookmarks? Fry developed a prototype of a sticky removable bookmark. The team at 3M soon realized its true potential wasn't as a bookmark, but as a new way to communicate. After a massive and successful marketing push in Boise, Idaho, where 90% of people who tried the free samples said they'd buy it, the Press and Peel was rebranded. In 1980, the Post-it note was born, becoming one of the most successful office products in history. A failed experiment became an indispensable tool for communication and organization worldwide. In 1945, Percy Spencer, a self-taught engineer at Raytheon, was working on magnetrons, the high-powered vacuum tubes that generate microwaves for radar systems. One day, while standing in front of an active radar set, he noticed something strange. The chocolate bar in his pocket had started to melt. While others might have just thought about their ruined snack, Spencer was struck by curiosity. This was the butterfly moment. He immediately grabbed a bag of popcorn kernels and held them in front of the magnetron. They began to pop all over the lab. The next day, he brought in an egg, which famously exploded in a colleague's face. Spencer realized that the microwave radiation was cooking the food. He designed a simple metal box to contain the microwaves, creating the world's first microwave oven. The first commercial model, released in 1947, was called the Radarange. It was a monster, standing nearly 6 feet tall, weighing 750 pounds, and costing a fortune. But the idea of rapid cooking was born. Decades later, it would evolve into the compact, affordable appliance that sits in billions of kitchens, fundamentally changing how we cook and eat. All because a candy bar melted in a scientist's pocket. In the early 16th century, the Catholic Church was raising money to rebuild St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. A key fundraising method was the sale of indulgences, documents that supposedly lessened the time a soul would have to spend in purgatory. In Germany, a friar named Johann Tetzel was a particularly effective indulgence salesman. This practice horrified a German theology professor and monk named Martin Luther. He believed salvation was a gift from God through faith, not something that could be bought and sold. This conviction was the butterfly's wing beat. On October 31, 1517, he wrote down his objections in what became known as the 95 Theses, and, according to legend, nailed them to the door of the Wittenberg Castle Church. Luther probably just intended to start an academic debate. But thanks to the new technology of the printing press, his arguments spread like wildfire across Germany and then Europe. What began as a theological dispute escalated into a massive schism. Luther's single act of protest against a church fundraising tactic inadvertently sparked the Protestant Reformation, a movement that broke the religious unity of Europe, fueled centuries of wars, and fundamentally reshaped Western civilization. On April 26, 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant was scheduled to run a seemingly routine safety test on Reactor 4. The goal was to see if, in the event of a power failure, the slowing turbines could generate enough electricity to power the cooling pumps until the backup generators kicked in. The test itself was the butterfly, a small planned procedure. But a series of human errors and fatal design flaws in the reactor turned the test into a catastrophe. The test was delayed, leaving an unprepared and exhausted night shift to carry it out. To keep the reactor from shutting down prematurely, operators disabled critical safety systems. They pulled out far too many control rods, putting the reactor in an extremely unstable state. When they initiated the test, the power surged uncontrollably. The emergency shutdown button, which was supposed to insert the control rods and stop the reaction, had a disastrous design flaw. The tips of the rods momentarily increased the reaction. This caused a massive power spike, leading to two huge explosions that blew the 2,000-ton lid off the reactor and spewed a column of radioactive material into the atmosphere. A single, poorly executed safety test caused the worst nuclear disaster in history, rendering a vast area uninhabitable and releasing radiation across Europe, with health and environmental consequences that persist to this day. The sinking of the RMS Titanic on April 15, 1912, is a story of many failures, but one of the most haunting butterfly effects involves a single, misplaced key. The key belonged to a locker in the crow's nest, and inside that locker were the binoculars meant for the ship's lookouts. The man who had the key was Second Officer David Blair. Just before the Titanic set sail from Southampton, there was a last-minute crew reshuffle. Blair was transferred off the ship. In his haste to disembark, he forgot to hand over the key to his replacement. On the night of the disaster, lookouts Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee were forced to rely on their eyes alone in the moonless, dangerously calm conditions. At the official inquiry, Fleet testified that if they had had binoculars, they would have seen the iceberg much sooner, possibly in time for the ship to take evasive action. While it's impossible to say for certain if it would have changed the outcome, the absence of a simple tool, caused by a forgotten key, crippled the ship's ability to spot danger. That tiny oversight contributed to a chain of events that led to the deaths of over 1,500 people and the most infamous maritime disaster in history. Christopher Columbus sailed west not because he thought the Earth was round, most educated people already knew that, but because he made a huge mathematical mistake. He drastically underestimated the size of the planet. Columbus believed the Earth was much smaller than it actually is, and he thought Asia was much wider. He calculated that Japan was only about 2,400 miles west of the Canary Islands. The real distance is closer to 10,000 miles. It was this colossal blunder, this butterfly effect of bad math, that made his voyage seem possible. Had he known the true distance, no one would have funded such an impossibly long journey. When Columbus set sail in 1492, he wasn't looking for a new world. He was looking for a shortcut to the rich spice markets of the East. After weeks at sea, his crew was on the verge of mutiny. Terrified they had sailed off the edge of the world. It was only by sheer luck that an entire continent, a massive landmass no one in Europe knew existed, was sitting right in his path. His miscalculation didn't lead him to Asia, but it did lead him to the Americas, triggering the age of European exploration, conquest and colonization that would forever change the world. In the year 312 AD, the Roman Empire was locked in a civil war. Constantine, one of several rival emperors, was marching on Rome to face his main opponent, Maxentius, at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. Constantine was outnumbered and, as a pagan, likely praying to various gods for help. According to the historian Eusebius, as Constantine and his army marched, they saw a vision in the sky. A cross of light above the sun, inscribed with the Greek words en touto nika, or in this sign, conquer. That night, Constantine had a dream in which Christ appeared and told him to use the sign as his standard. This was the butterfly moment. Constantine ordered his soldiers to paint the Chi symbol, the first two letters of Christ's name, on their shields. Against the odds, he won a crushing victory. Maxentius drowned in the Tiber River during the retreat. Convinced he had won because of the Christian god's favor, Constantine's attitude shifted. He enacted the Edict of Milan, granting religious tolerance throughout the empire and ending the persecution of Christians. His personal conversion and political patronage set Christianity on a path from a persecuted minority faith to the dominant religion of the Western world. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, Julius Caesar was walking to the Senate House, where a group of conspirators was waiting to assassinate him. But he was almost saved by a simple note. A Greek teacher of rhetoric named Artemidorus had learned of the plot. He rushed to intercept Caesar and thrust a small scroll into his hand, detailing the entire conspiracy and naming the men who planned to kill him. He urged Caesar to read it immediately. But as Caesar walked, a crowd of petitioners swarmed him, all pressing their own documents into his hands. Here is the butterfly effect. In the crush of people and papers, Caesar simply passed the warning note to an attendant to read later, or perhaps held it in his hand, unread. He proceeded into the theater of Pompey, where the Senate was meeting. Minutes later, the conspirators surrounded him and stabbed him to death. Had he paused for just a moment to read that single scroll, he would have known the danger. His survival could have prevented the bloody civil wars that followed his death, and might have completely altered the transition of the Roman Republic into an empire under his heir, Augustus. In 1588, King Philip II of Spain launched the Invincible Armada, a massive fleet of 130 ships, to invade England, depose the Protestant Queen Elizabeth I, and restore Catholicism. The fate of England hung in the balance. After a series of running battles up the English Channel, the English fleet, under Lord Howard and Sir Francis Drake, launched a daring fireship attack on the anchored Armada at Calais. While the fireships did little direct damage, they panicked the Spanish, forcing them to cut their anchors and scatter into the North Sea. This was the opening the English needed. In the ensuing Battle of Gravelines, the smaller, more maneuverable English ships inflicted serious damage. But the true butterfly effect came from nature itself. As the battered and disorganized Spanish fleet tried to sail home by going north around Scotland and Ireland, it was hit by a series of ferocious storms. The winds, which the English gratefully called the Protestant wind, wrecked dozens of Spanish ships on the rocky coasts. Only about half of the Invincible Armada ever made it back to Spain. The weather didn't just help win a battle, it annihilated an invasion force, securing England's independence and Protestantism, and marking the beginning of the end of Spain's dominance of the seas. In 1958, the annual Visitors' Day at Brookhaven National Laboratory was a pretty dull affair, filled with static displays of scientific equipment. A physicist named William Higginbotham, who had worked on the Manhattan Project, decided to create something more interactive to liven things up. This desire to fight boredom was the butterfly's wingbeat. Using an old analog computer and a tiny 5-inch oscilloscope screen, Higginbotham and a colleague spent 3 weeks creating a simple game. It depicted a side view of a tennis court with a net, and 2 players used controllers with knobs and buttons to hit a ball back and forth. He called it Tennis for Two. On Visitors' Day, hundreds of people lined up for hours to play the simple electronic game. It was a massive hit. Yet after 2 years, the game was dismantled and its parts were used for other projects. Higginbotham, who didn't think his creation was very important, never even patented it. He had no idea that his little diversion, born from a desire to make a science exhibition more fun, was one of the world's first ever video games. It was a direct ancestor to Pong and the entire multi-billion-dollar video game industry that would transform global entertainment. In 1867, Russia was in a difficult position. The Crimean War had left the country financially drained, and its remote, sparsely populated territory in North America, Alaska, was seen as a costly, indefensible liability. Fearing it would eventually be lost to their rival, Great Britain, Tsar Alexander II decided to sell it. The butterfly here was the willing buyer. U.S. Secretary of State William Seward. Seward was a passionate expansionist who believed in America's destiny to spread across the continent. He negotiated a deal to purchase the vast territory for $7.5 million, which amounted to less than 2 cents an acre. The decision was widely mocked in the United States. Critics derided the purchase as Seward's folly and Seward's icebox, convinced he had wasted millions on a barren wasteland of ice and snow. For decades, it seemed like a bad deal. Then, in 1896, gold was discovered in the Klondike region, and Alaska became the gateway for a massive gold rush. Seward's folly turned out to be an incredible bargain, a land rich in gold, oil, fish, and timber. It also gave the U.S. an immense strategic foothold in the Arctic, a critical geopolitical advantage during the Cold War and beyond, all because one man saw value where others saw only ice. On July 20, 1944, with Germany clearly losing the war, a brave group of high-ranking officers executed their plan to assassinate Adolf Hitler. The plot, known as Operation Valkyrie, was led by Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg. Stauffenberg carried a bomb in his briefcase into a strategy meeting with Hitler at his Wolf's Lair command post. He placed the briefcase on the floor as close to Hitler as possible, and then made an excuse to leave the room. This was the moment that should have changed history. But here, the butterfly effect intervened in the form of a minor inconvenience. Another officer at the meeting, Colonel Heinz Brandt, wanted to get a better look at a map. Finding the briefcase in his way, he casually leaned down and moved it to the other side of a massive solid oak table leg. A few minutes later, the bomb exploded. The blast obliterated the room, but the thick table leg acted as a shield, deflecting the majority of the explosion away from Hitler. He survived with only minor injuries. Stauffenberg's act of defiance, which could have ended the war and saved millions of lives, was defeated by an almost unconscious, trivial act. Hitler's survival led to a brutal crackdown, and the continuation of the war for nearly another year of unimaginable bloodshed. In 1938, a chemist at DuPont named Roy Plunkett was working on developing a new, non-toxic refrigerant gas. He and his assistant had produced a batch of tetrafluoroethylene, TFE gas, and stored it in small pressurized cylinders. One morning, Plunkett came to use one of the cylinders and found that no gas came out, even though the cylinder felt just as heavy as a full one. Curious and confused, he sawed the canister open. Inside, he didn't find gas but a strange, waxy, incredibly slippery white powder. The TFE gas had spontaneously polymerized. This was a lucky accident. Instead of throwing the weird substance out, Plunkett and his team decided to study it. They discovered this new material, polytetrafluoroethylene, PTFE, was resistant to virtually every chemical and was one of the most slippery substances known to man. At first, its only use was for military applications in the Manhattan Project. It wasn't until years later that the wife of a French engineer suggested trying the material on her cooking pans to keep food from sticking. The result was Teflon, a brand that revolutionized home cooking. A failed experiment with refrigerant gas ended up in billions of kitchens around the world. From an unlocked gate to a melted chocolate bar, history is not a straight line. It's a chaotic and fascinating web. The world we live in is the result of countless tiny moments and accidents that could have easily gone the other way. A different roll of the dice, a different calculation, a key not forgotten, or a briefcase not moved. Any one of these could have sent us down a completely different timeline. It's a humbling thought that the grand sweep of history often balances on the smallest of hinges. It proves that in the grand, complex system of our world, even the flap of a single butterfly's wings can, and often does, change everything. What other butterfly effects from history can you think of? Let us know in the comments below. If you found these historical chain reactions as mind-blowing as we did, be sure to follow or subscribe for more deep dives into the fascinating world of butterflies. Thank you for watching, and remember, at Papillon Chateau, every wing tells a story.